Andreas, welcome to PropTech Talks. Good to have you on, and welcome everybody to another episode of PropTech Talks, where we talk with real estate executives, investors, and entrepreneurs about the current nuances of the real estate industry and what to do about them. We're here with Andreas Kozma, the CEO of iREMS. Andreas, good to have you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So let's get to know you a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the industry a little bit as well. About your somewhat unique founder journey, the company journey, not your typical, let's say, venture capital backed, buying growth, let's say, start. A little bit more focused, I would say, in some regards. But love to hear from you. What actually, how did iREMS even come about?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's true that I probably had a much more technical journey, so feature driven or use case driven. I was actually already during the studies, which I did in Zurich, early 90s, so that was before the internet, quite a while ago. I was lucky enough to be able to write my thesis in the topic of enterprise IT. And the University of Zurich had even, it's hard to imagine, pre-internet, pre-email days, they had cooperations with the University of South Africa, with Stanford, with MIT Sloan Management School. And there, very early on, I was always attracted to the intersection of business and IT, mm-hmm. So which is really in corporate IT is very important, that the business requirements and not just the technology. And there we were able to study the importance of how do you actually implement enterprise IT, how do you make sure it's used, how do you make sure it does what it needs to do. And I was fortunate to be able to go on a traineeship in Chicago, where then I ended up developing my first ERP system with a team of a couple of developers there for a American Fortune 500, a chemical company. It was a specific use case there for transporting dangerous chemicals, and how do you keep track of all the journeys and all the labeling on the trucks and so forth. So there I learned how to work with the business to identify pain points, identify business requirements, and then develop a data structure, and then develop the system behavior around it, and then develop the software.
Something like this chemical business, and creating it from the first time, especially when now there's so much software out there. There are so many tools out there. There's a benchmark for how things should look. How do you approach something as complicated as creating the ERP for a chemical company? And I think the follow-on from that is, how does the real estate industry compare from the enterprise systems used by a system that may be used in another industry?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I did then go on to working on SAP implementations as a consultant, also in Central Europe and in Western Europe, big banking software solutions. And then after a while, we were asked by a Geneva real estate fund, and that's mm-hmm. where was my first encounter with real estate, mm-hmm. To help them purchase a financial reporting system for them. Mm-hmm. And what I saw that actually the real estate sector or real estate industry is two things. It's more complicated in terms of that the asset class is much more diverse, much more rich. A building, obviously, to describe it, to capture its attributes, has many, many more data points than a company share, for example, or a bond. Mm. And the second thing is that economies of scale are unfortunately absent mostly, in such a way that you have a very big diversity of different portfolios, different investments, and so forth. And then you have very small numbers of transactions. So whereas in the chemical industry or in the banking, you would have millions of transactions a month, which you could, then it would make sense to make them more efficient and to really spend energy to try to improve the way that it works to get the savings. And in real estate, even a bigger fund, if they have 20,000 invoices per month to process, that's a huge number already. Most funds go well below that level, and that's still a much smaller number. So also to let's say justify the expenditures to make these processes more efficient and to put the energy into there is a much harder sale. And as such, therefore, we see in the real estate industry that the same class ERP functionality is less standardized, less developed, and you see also, let's say, more problems. So companies are struggling solving that problem.
Well, what's also interesting is, yes, the transaction volume is decreased, but it's also not algorithmic. It also requires a human to understand, or less algorithmic, I would say. A lot of the time, it requires a human to understand the data, I would say, better. It also means that each transaction has more of an impact, which means the value of a good decision.
Yeah, true.
It's not a sort of a trend thing where we're going a bit off. We can reiterate a good decision or a bad decision can completely have an effect on the portfolio.
Very
and
true.
That's now as we've, let's say, moved away from a low interest rate environment, we're moving into a higher interest rate environment. It's not a case of making a good real estate bet or a great real estate bet. It's a question of making the right bets. And I think that's why even, at the previous, or the just now gone PropTech Connect, we had a lot of the discussion around making the right decisions, but people seemed at the same time optimistic that the tools were there and that the environment is there to do so. Now, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Sorry, it's actually right what you're saying, that not just, the volumes are smaller, but also actually if you take the transactions, the operational transactions, like a lemon, and that you need to squeeze that to get like the essence, and this essence is used in the decision making. So there's much more juice needed in real estate to make good decisions than in other industries, because those are much more regulated, more static, and so forth. So it's very true, actually.
Very good point. Just one thing that I do want to look into a little bit, I find quite interesting. You were doing enterprise implementations, you mentioned Chicago, and I suppose Western Europe, but then also in Central Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
What experiences from these roles have, let's say, been the most interesting and I suppose formative in how you've transitioned to actually founding iREMS?
So that's obviously many things learned, but if I may, let's say, had to distill the most important lessons, it was really around the fact that every company operates slightly differently. Other reports are required from ERP. So in the 90s, it was called MIS, Management Information System. So now it's called ERP. And then we have obviously the reporting levels, the dashboards, the data lakes, and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's very important to that there is a best practice. So this is a discussion that we're still having, and very strong discussions and strong viewpoints. Can you unify these functionalities in the reporting level and so forth? And what I see is that over the years, the field of the whole ERP functionality is very big. It's literally like an invisible city in the sky, lots of functionalities, OPEX, CAPEX, and so forth. Financing, very rich, but it's finite. So there is a best practice where you go around, and there is a perimeter that you can draw around the financial data that is needed to manage the performance of a real estate portfolio. But being it very diverse, that's where you see that there is many different systems around. There is not really a market leader that has emerged that solves all the problems. So data fragmentation is still a very big concern. In fact, I would say it's as big a concern as it was maybe 15, 20 years ago. Now with the explosion almost of prop tech tools and silo applications, the task is even bigger to integrate this data. So maybe the main lesson that we've learned is that from big ERP implementations that it's not such a good approach to go to each client and then sit down and diligently take notes. Okay, what are your business requirements? Write big documents of the interviews, and then you have the specifications. Before that, you have the business requirements documents, which is duly signed. But the fact of the matter is that it's very difficult, even for the members of the organization, to clearly state what they want, because maybe they may not think of everything, or they think they know what they want, but in the end, when they work with the system, it will turn out they actually wanted something slightly different. So to then go to each company and say, okay, we have this base system. You want something different? Okay, that's fine. We'll make a bespoke customization for that. So in fact, we're selling you the system, and then we write a bunch of custom software for you. You have to pay for it in full, and that's yours then. And actually, what many companies often don't realize, that when you need to upgrade the next time, then you're responsible of your own custom implementation. You need to make sure that that works with our next version. So, and then there's actually not one version of that system that we're selling. There's 100 versions, because for every client we did something different.
Right.
And we are seeing companies where they have customized 50% of an entire system, which is unbelievable. So what we're seeing, that it's a much more sustainable way to say, okay, let's understand, let's really work with the company. And this is where the change management and the business consulting comes in, because you really need to spend time to understand the business requirements, to talk through it, to build prototypes, to have them try the functionality and verify. And what we're seeing as a process, that yes, there is a best practice. And in the end, the companies, of course, they have different reports and slightly varying data requirements and emphasis and so forth. But fundamentally, how the data model needs to be put together to really see, again, those NOI, IRR at the top of a fund is fundamentally the same everywhere. So we see actually as our biggest enemy, together with the clients, or the biggest challenge, is complexity. So how can we communicate, how can we simplify and give names to the various, also unify the naming. Rental income is, base rent, rent-free. In different countries, these terms still mean different things. And all of these little differences add enough friction that there is misunderstanding. If you receive a collection report or a rent roll from a property manager in the UK, it will have different names in it than the one you receive from Poland or from Spain. And then to aggregate those, which is very often still done in Excel, then you have these little misunderstandings creeping in, and that's where your data then isn't clean anymore.
Right. So I mean, it's actually very refreshing what you're hearing, what you're saying, because when you actually do think post 07, 08, the cash injection era, the 0.5% interest era, a lot of growth came despite let's call it some bad practice, okay? Because it's actually quite difficult to not grow in an economically prosperous phase.
Absolutely.
And if real estate is so tightly tied to GDP, with 0.5% interest, I mean, it's very difficult to actually not not have a profitable portfolio if you're borrowing and your rent covers literally almost 0.5%. At this, it would almost be akin to, somebody who is exercising but is taking steroids, and maybe not even eating well, and the training is not great either, but they're growing, all sorts of muscles, and then
Indeed.
they stop. And we had that stopping, which is a pandemic changed people's ways of working completely, and also interest rates increased tenfold. Yes. And it's almost the welcome to the real world moment. And I was having this discussion this week with an asset manager, and I was almost a bit cheeky. I said, it's actually a good thing. And his face,
Depends whom you ask.
I said, it was actually a good thing. And at first, the reaction may have not been positive, but we both did come to the conclusion, the real estate industry does need to be putting attention on some of the right things and building from there. So why does a single source of truth, having clean data, having, let's say, an easily accessible understanding of what exactly is happening on the portfolio, why is it now critical to have this if you are looking to let's say grow AUM or have a more profitable portfolio?
Well, if you imagine that you have 4 reports on your table, and imagine these are not reports, these are people whom you can ask, and you ask, well, what is our average rent here for this asset? And all the 4 people will tell you something different, or how big is the total GLA of my portfolio? And the reports disagree, and you see that there's inconsistencies and errors. You get a very blurry message. So again, this additional noise or complexity is much harder for you to make the decision, because half your brain is busy figuring out what are these differences, why are they there? And if you don't have a single source of truth, then fundamentally this is exactly what happens with smaller or even bigger funds, that they spend a lot of energy on multiple levels, actually, because even the asset managers, they spend too much time cleaning up the data and making sure that they check the reports and understand. And as they're handing it higher up, there may still be inconsistencies. So it's almost like having a blurry vision, and then it's quite clear that your decisions will not be as good. If you have a very clear, unambiguous message, as what we call a single source of truth, it's like having a laser clear focus, and you can really concentrate. You even see the details, obviously, and that allows you to get better information and make better decisions, also develop a better gut feeling.
Now, when it comes to let's say a use case of this, because on the one hand, hearing, okay, having clarity on your assets, can show where you're making an error, where something is inefficient, but at the same time, putting it into practice. This is a theoretical but clear idea, but putting it into practice might be not so difficult, not so easy, especially we're thinking about the numerous stakeholders involved often in investment decisions, the different goals of different departments. A lot of companies also moving from are integrating the OpCo model into their previous PropCo operations. With all of that in mind, I'm thinking iREMS integrates asset management, property management, into the offering. Let's say, how can I'll actually ask the question, what would you say is the ideal case study that people really should listen to around utilizing data effectively to actually be strategically growing and getting the most out of it? And before you answer, let me just check one thing on both of these phones. Okay, all good. Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's look at a case. One of our clients, Adventum, It's originally a Hungarian team, but the fund is incorporated in Europe, fundamentally, I believe, Luxembourg and Malta. And they had a very clear strategy from the get-go. And in terms of what's important for this discussion, they also had a clear data strategy. So they are using iREMS to basically control the whole vertical of the information, all the way from property management up to asset management and fund management. They are working heavily outsourcing their models, so they have more than 15 service providers in 5 countries where they are active in covering almost all commercial asset classes, or by now even all of them.
And by that, do you mean property managers and facility managers?
Property managers, facility managers, accountants. So, but they control the data, so they know what data they need, and having a system allows them to tell the service providers, okay, this is how we need to enter information, what we call data entry standards. And then not only do they have the data sitting in their own system, so if a service provider doesn't work out or they need to change, it's much easier to retender. And you're hearing a lot of cases where certain service providers, when they own the data, then obviously they may not want to hand it over, or all sorts of things can happen. And in this case, the fund, Adventum, is actually controlling all the information. And they can also then first ask the service providers who put in the data how to put it in. So they determine at the top what reporting that they need. So they can say, okay, to retrieve this, we need to put it in like this. The system then, of course, validates a lot of it, but it can never validate everything. So then with the data entry standards then, which are easily enforceable, they make sure that they get the right data. And also through the system, they can easily check whether data quality is there. And the big advantage of that is that even at the top, when they need the aggregated data, they have all the way to drill down to the source. So if they see something strange, it's not like it's like a brick wall and this is it. They have some number in a tenancy schedule which they don't understand, so they call the service provider. No, they go into their system and they see all the invoices, all the bookings related to it, all the payments, and they can see exactly what's going on. So their portfolio becomes this living thing which they can really, as the heart is pulsating, they can take the pulse and they can see. And to build this up, obviously, is not an easy thing, because you need to have a vision, you need to work. So you need to implement all the modules, you need to onboard and train the external service providers. But compared to the problems or to the amount of work that's required to consolidate disparate sources that come in via Excel every month, is even like this, it's still a faster way to having that single source of truth at the top. Now, if we look at this case study, several important things that first, they need to, so it's important to have a good focus on data governance. So even and obviously that needs to happen at the management level, at the board level, to say, okay, data is important. We need to have data governance. We need to figure out what we want. Even this, with a good number of companies still out there, funds, we see that that is not happening. It's like delegated down to the IT department or something, and they don't realize that this is not a system question, it's not an IT question, it's not a question of either just the asset management department or the CFO's desk. It's really a question for the whole company. And especially now with ESG and so forth, that's yet another department that needs to work with the data. And so very often it's the same data, like you re-invoice energy consumption. That's the same data that you need in the ESG department. So if you have these departments doing all their own little thing, there will be duplications, and that unifying picture that must emerge for that you really see with sharp laser vision and that you can make good decisions. For that, you need to have that, what we call a unified data model. And that doesn't even then mean always, oh, surely that means one system, it's impossible because we already have this system and that system. No, it's first you need to build your data model almost in business language, in business terms. So it's not a technical thing. And then you can say, okay, if we need this data here, it's almost like, again, a blueprint of a city. You have here the CapEx part, you have the OpEx, you have your landing costs, your acquisition costs, and then how does the gate get the data from here to here, and from here I need this data point. So you need to have this master plan, so to speak. And then you can start then, and this is where the IT department comes in, where I say, okay, right, so we already have a system for this, then we'll need something here, but then we actually need to connect these together because we have these data requirements. And then if you build it like this in a very conscious way, then it works well.
So we're, with that in mind, there's this, there almost seems to be a little bit of a structural shift to get the most out of this new phase the industry is going into, and what we're seeing at the event that actually quite uniquely is an enormous range in performance right now for I think really a lot of investors, a lot of asset managers. You have some that are finding these spectacular deals, and as liquidity starts to come back, as rates do gradually lower, and as people understand how to operate in this environment, and are also have accepted the fact that the environment is acutely different to 5 years ago, and are acting accordingly. We see, a upper quartile of very high performers. They've repositioned assets when required. They know what to do with the portfolio, let's say. Yeah. Okay.
They always seem to do the right thing.
They always seem to do the right thing. They always have a smile on their face.
Not sure about that, but yes.
That's what I've been seeing. But at the same time, you have another group who are, let's say, they're not doing well. The margins are not really there. So let's say these leaders, as we do start to go into as rates do start to gradually lower, as the ability to use data improves. Well, of course, we think a lot of AI, as and what's that, one of the even speakers was saying, the ESG mandates are actually seemingly helpful to some of these businesses, because they've actually been the ignition that was required to increase margins and energy and things.
True.
But with what for a real estate leader who thinks, okay, this all sounds great, I know I start needing to do this. What would actually be the practical advice, as deals start to come back, as opportunities start to come back, but we are clearly also in that new phase? What would be your advice to really, and even as you say, looking at it from the business perspective, not even the technical perspective, on the business perspective, how to excel in this new phase we're going into?
So I'm just thinking, has anything changed in this over the years? Because what we see, even though you have the technology shifting very quickly, but the basic truths are still there, that those who seem to do everything right and have the answer in every moment to turn this asset around and find the right asset strategy and so forth, they're having good information, and of course then they're able to enact, take action on the good information. They communicate well, they have good decision mechanisms, but the focus is there. So the teams are well organized, the interests of the various teams are aligned. So I would say that even to get there, that you can take advantage of the new tools that you have nowadays, which undoubtedly you have lightsabers nowadays compared to years ago, with AI and all these solutions. It's absolutely unbelievable. But in order to be able to harness that power and to select the tools and put them together into an infrastructure that works for you, First of all, you probably need to do that before the good times come back, because then you will be busy in transactions and going after the opportunities and so forth. So you need to spend time and energy on that probably before. But again, it really helps to have a laser focus coming all the way down from the business strategy, so from the boardroom, and then either have a data czar or a person whose sole job is to work with the departments every single day. That webinar we did with the Dutch lady Marianne from Shell. Remember how she said it's a daily grind. You need to be there, you need to work with every department. So enacting the change, getting people to work on the same data platform and collecting the data in a uniform way, that's tough work. And so this is, I think, where change management comes in. And in many places, that's widely underestimated. And those, let's call them the successful ones or the winners, these really the top quartile. What we see there, that they do have this strategy, they do have this focus, and they are doing these change management activities. And change management is a fancy term, but all it actually means that you take seriously the fact that you need to communicate with all your teams, with the people. You need to explain to the people why the new technology is good, the purpose. So that's a lot of communication, a lot of effort. But if you don't do that, you just have the IT department roll out a new system, then miraculously somehow it doesn't catch on, people don't use it. And it is this bit in the middle which connects the strategy with the actual technology solutions, this processes and working with the people, what we call, which is largely covered by change management, which is absolutely important and actually a distinguishing factor.
I mean, I think it does seem to be the case that more businesses, took a bit of time, but more businesses are starting to catch on to the fact that you can't gut feel your way into a hyper profitable, say, fund, not fully at least. And as data does, and people do seem to be getting better data, the tools do seem to be more and more considered.
Yes.
At the same time, as data does become more central to real estate operations, and also, actually, real estate is more operational. Even on any asset class, there are some more nuances and complexities. Even if you look at commercial, it's not just a case of 20-year lease, fill-out office, and that's that.
It's much faster, dynamic.
No one changes jobs, because to change a job, you don't go on LinkedIn. You have to literally run around in the rain after 6 p.m. on your way home with a big stack of papers and hope that people didn't really even change jobs as much. As data becomes more required and more central to real estate operations, where do you see demands shifting? Then let's say towards something like real-time analytics, just towards AI, or even predictive analytics, something else completely. Where do you see the demand shifting over the next few years?
I think you actually need to have a mix. So it's not a simple answer. And just I'm thinking, coming back to the initial discussion of the economies of scale, that this is a very good example, because yes, you need to use AI. It's quite clear. It can be very powerful, but it's also not straightforward how to use it because of the privacy issues, hallucination, and so forth. You need to use predictive tools, because you asset manage your asset in the future. You're not looking back at the last 6 years, or at least if you're only doing that, you're in the wrong position. You need to anticipate the future. You need to have the reporting with the data visualization tools and so forth. And yet again, if you look at the staff size of your average landlord or fund or owner of real estate, and you compare that to pharma companies or telco companies or banks, it's
True.
It's completely out of proportion. And yet every investor, owner of real estate, is expected to make the best decisions. And undoubtedly, because of these accelerations and the increase of granularity of the data that you need, it needs to become ever more data driven. So that's a very big challenge.
So, we've talked about the, let's say, increase in technology in our industry, the rapidly changing prop tech landscape. How does iREMS position itself to stay ahead of this landscape? How do you differentiate?
So stay ahead. We try to serve our clients. So we try to see, okay, where can we help them, or where can we take this burden down from them to have all these choices and spend a disproportionate amount of time and energy to put together a data infrastructure. So hence our quest for the best practice processes. And again, it's finance, it's not culture, it's not religion. So how many best ways to do it can there be? Probably just one. It's just it consists of very many moving parts, but that's why we are working very hard with as many clients from as many countries as we can to put together this one set of best practices, of course, heavily configurable, that's clear, but still the methodology, we're seeing it's absolutely converging, even the different countries and the different asset classes. So, and by coming up with one good solution, then, for example, back to your question, what did we learn from the problems or challenges of the ERP industry? We don't customize at iREMS. Sounds crazy, but we don't customize. So we will not burden a client with a code that we write just for them. First of all, no matter how much money they pay, there is never enough time to really put enough thought deeply into that just for this one project. So if you look around these implementations, it's very hard to think of all the cases. And so we say that we have one size fits all, and we constantly build the new use cases. Again, sometimes we put configurations, you have 3 options to use it, but we know that these 3 options, each of them is good. Otherwise, we say, look, it really thinks there is only one good option, so we convince them, and if we can't convince them, we were right. Then they say, oh, great, this is really a much better way to do it. So like this, we can actually reduce the complexity because we take all these lessons learned by us, by our clients, by other companies, and we cast these business rules, this knowledge into the software.
Well, I mean, there's a really interesting balance there, which is, and also I suppose even an underlying philosophy on all of this, which is that interestingly, you're giving the tools for the clients to deeply understand their assets, and you are deeply understanding your clients. But I think the interesting balance from this is then to resist the temptation to go out and trying to bespoke stack on and plaster on, and instead making something modular so you don't have to, so that they can. I find that a really neat, well-rounded, sort of clean philosophy and a clean solution. And I suppose actually when you think about future-proofing, that actually all does make sense.
We think that's, exactly the best way of future-proofing. It needs one thing, attention to detail. And again, to figure it out, it does take time, and it does take time on the business level. So again, the busy and transaction-driven executives of the real estate industry, very often, they probably rightly say, look, I don't have the time and so forth. But they do need to make the time to think about these things, to really set up, again, the processes right, the reporting inventories, and how can that be simplified. And actually, it doesn't take that much time. We're not talking months or years. It's rather days and weeks, workshops. However, with the right people on the table can work absolute miracles. And if that attention to that, it's not even detailed, sometimes it's really the high level. So the attention to that data governance is there. That's a huge booster.
Just to finish, what's the thing you're the most excited for? I suppose in the industry, but also how iREMS will be part of that.
So actually, it may sound cliche, but AI.
Okay.
Because this AI is absolutely amazing that here you have, it's almost like everybody has their own little employee, and you can, assistant really, as long as you don't think it's your teacher and you know that it's actually your assistant, and you need to tell what you want and then need to check the answer. It's a huge efficiency booster. So we're looking very much forward to also increase our own efficiency as we work, whether it's software development or working with the specifications and so forth. Huge difference. We know it helps our clients, and also to build all these tools well into the iREMS stack. So lease abstraction, invoice recognition, document processing, summarization is absolutely amazing. But again, the same rules apply. You really need to think hard about the functionalities. And the same traps apply, that if you just stack it together, then you will have information not being compatible, you will have the noise and so forth. So in a way, it's still the old priorities, but with AI, if that's done properly, then wow, that's going to be really a game changer, and that's very exciting.
Amazing. Andreas, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.